Former head of the EU Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker. I'm going to be looking at whether we're close to the great AI bubble going pop and what that would mean for Britain. We'll hear from the Gaza peace talks and from a democracy campaigner about the collapse of the Westminster Chinese spy trial. So, busy day, big stories. Join me after the news.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, the man who carried out an attack on a synagogue in Manchester last week called police pledging allegiance to the Islamic State group. 35-year-old Jihad al-Shami rang 999 during the attack in Crumpsall on Thursday. Rob Potts is Assistant Chief Constable at Greater Manchester Police and has given this update.
I can reiterate, al-Shami had never been referred to the PREVENT programme, nor was otherwise known to counter-terrorism policing. However, at this stage of the investigation, we are more confident that he was influenced by extreme Islamist ideology, and the 999 call forms part of this assessment.
Kemi Badenoch says a Conservative government would scrap stamp duty. Closing her party's conference, she promised to end what she called a bad tax, but Labour says she's in denial. The mother of Madeleine McCann has been giving evidence to a court in the case of two women accused of stalking the family. 24-year-old Julia Van Delt and Karen Spragg, who's 61, both deny the charges against them. And shops will soon need a licence to sell vapes and tobacco. It's hoped the move will help to tackle rogue traders and protect children. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 65 points at 95.48. The pound buys $1.33 and €1.15. LBC weather, cloudy and patchy rain for southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland tonight. Windy elsewhere in the north, but mainly dry. Calm and chilly in the south, lows of 7 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. It's 6 p.m. Now, Tonight with Andrew Marr.
Good evening. The final day of the Tory conference with the big speech from Kemi Badenoch is a good moment to ask the hard but glaringly obvious question, are the Conservatives over? She announced proposed tax cuts, including the abolition of stamp duty. She savaged Keir Starmer, but barely 1 in 5 voters expect her ever to become Prime Minister. One of the Western world's most successful ever electoral machines, founded in the 1830s, and the party which has dominated British politics during my lifetime, is now polling in the mid-teens, around a dozen points behind Reform. Political parties have no God-given right to survive. The old Liberal Party went, and so did the Whigs before them, and there were long periods in the last century when it looked as if the Labour Party would not survive. Now, of course, things can change. Labour did survive, and while there is life, there is hope, and all of that. But this is a deep, deep hole. The revered pollster Sir John Curtis says the Tories will almost certainly win fewer seats at the next election than the Liberal Democrats. Conservatives at the Manchester conference were putting on a brave face, but behind the scenes, Tory members themselves seem quite close to surrendering to their right-wing rivals. Other polling says 2/3 of them would want a pact with Reform, and nearly half would like a full merger. Right, let's turn first to LBC's political editor, Natasha Clark, who has been up in Manchester and has returned. Natasha, we'll talk a bit more about the future of the Conservative Party in a moment, but what about the future of Kemi Badenoch? A general sense that perhaps this speech has saved her, at least for the rest of this year?
I think that's right, Andrew. I think it's definitely bought her at least another 6 months. I spoke to MPs, I spoke to party members on the way out of her speech who were delighted by her performance today. It's fair to say that that's probably one of the strongest speeches that Kemi Badenoch has given of her leadership so far. A bit of a best of greatest hits of sort of hitting out at Labour, the reasons why the country is in such a mess under her thoughts about it anyway, and some of the solutions for what she would do to try and fix it. But yeah, they absolutely lapped it up, the members today. It is fair to say that the members definitely do not want a leadership challenge for Kemi Badenoch anytime soon.
That's really, I'm thinking of the kind of parallels between the Labour conference as well in Liverpool. And, like the Labour Party conference, there was a putative challenger hanging around, not Andy Burnham this time, but Robert Jenrick. And without being mean, I thought his speech didn't perhaps go quite as well as he expected it to.
No, and potentially Robert Jenrick may have looked at what happened to Andy Burnham last week at the Labour Party conference as an example of how not to launch a leadership coup against your own party leader. It's fair to say that Robert Jenrick was very well behaved at this conference, minus obviously those leaked recordings of him from a few months ago about the comments that he made about race. But overall, I think he was on best behaviour. I think he was probably testing the temperature of the room and of members and of MPs. And it's fair to say that obviously there are still grumbles there. There are still concerns about Kemi's leadership. There are concerns about the direction of the party. But Kemi's speech today, clearly very well received by members, clearly very well received by MPs. They are in no position. There is no plan. There is no challenger waiting in the wings. Kemi Badenoch has got more time.
So she certainly leaves Manchester in a stronger position than she arrived.
Completely.
Natasha, thank you. Scarlett, let me talk to you. I was mentioning all the polling numbers right at the top of the show. Am I going too far to say the Conservatives are in a very, very deep hole when you look at their numbers compared to Reform?
No, I don't think you are going too far. They obviously had their worst ever electoral defeat last year in July, and since then they've actually gone backwards quite substantially. They've lost a third more of their voters since then, so going back from 24% of the polls, as you say, an average of 15-16%, depending on where you look. And I think what would be even more worrying for sort of Lotto is the fact that there are more voters, I think, there that are up for grabs from Reform, and potentially from other parties as well, but mostly from Reform. So there's no sign that bleeding has necessarily stopped.
Well, Scarlett, I should say you're director of Merlin Strategies and a pollster yourself. You know whereof you speak. I was speaking to other pollsters earlier on today who were saying in our new political system where there's sort of 5 different parties competing for power, very small differences can make huge changes. So, for instance, if Reform got the next election and were 2 points ahead of Labour, they would be the largest party. If they were 7 points or more ahead of Labour, they would form the government. Now, at the moment, they're about 10 points ahead, so we're into very, very interesting territory.
We certainly are, and I would add a slight health warning that seat predictions at this time are anyone's guess, and actually even in a few years' time, now that we're living in a system with 4 parties, 5 parties potentially even counting somebody, it's going to be almost impossible for pollsters to accurately call seats going into the next election. But no, you're right, you're in completely unprecedented territory, which is why the stakes are just so high for the Conservative Party, because it's not just looking at being reduced to the sort of 120 MPs that they were now, it's potentially looking at extinction.
It's a very, very serious moment for them. Does this make your life as a pollster more interesting or virtually impossible?
I think a bit of both. Yeah, it's more interesting. It comes with a lot more challenges, but it certainly it's more interesting. And what I love about it is people are more interested as well. Everyone's fascinated in terms of what's going on at the polls at the moment.
Let's hope so. Scarlett and Natasha, thank you both very, very much. One of the boldest and most self-confident speeches in Manchester actually came from the shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride, who joins me now. Hot foot down in the car from Manchester. You've made it, Mel. Well done.
I have just arrived. I wouldn't have missed you for the world. And
that's very kind. Now, I thought it was a very confident speech, but I want to pick out one figure. Your savings that you're talking about are £47 billion, yeah? Mm-hmm. Now, I have researched a little bit the austerity years under Cameron and Osborne, and according to the IFS, they saved £46 billion, so almost exactly the same. And I just put it to you that looking for a way to encourage and enthuse the British people, offering them another dose of that kind of austerity isn't going to be hugely popular.
I'm not sure that's a like-for-like comparison.
That's a four-year comparison.
Well, OK, so our 47 billion is at the end of the scorecard, 29.30.
That's 4 years
That's where you're saving.
It's fair. It's a fair
well, I think, actually, if you dig around it, we have a long conversation about OBR forecasts and the numbers and so on and so forth. But the reality is what you can't get away from is that we are living beyond our means. So the level of our debt, the debt servicing costs that we've got, the kind of headwinds the economy is going to face going forward, which we all know about, means that, and the OBR says this, that we're going to reach a point at some time in the future where the wheels come off the economy, unless there is a party that says it's going to be responsible with the public finances. And that means making those kind of savings to both pay down the debt, but equally to reduce taxes, particularly in a way that boosts growth, which is the way to address
normal,
those challenges.
common sense language, that does mean more years of austerity, though.
It means government living within its means, and the alternative is government not living within its means, and that is unsustainable. So there is no alternative to that. We have to grip that spending challenge in a way that this government hasn't. It's tried it with welfare and failed. We have a very clear plan, for example, of getting on top of a spiralling welfare budget. To your point about austerity, actually, that would take welfare spending back to the kind of level it was in 2023. So a lot of it is arresting what would otherwise be growth in that budget.
I really want to talk about benefits specifically, but before we get to that, a general criticism might be of the party, not just yourself, is that the savings are huge and vague, and the spending promises are clear and headline-grabbing. All the money on policing, all the money on a new deportation service, all the money to get rid of stamp duty, very, very popular. But we're given these doling out advantages, but the actual savings that are going to pay for them remain very misty.
Not at all. They've all been set out. They've all been flagged up. So if you take, for example, shrinking the size of the civil service back to where it was.
Everybody says this, Mel. Everybody says we can get rid of civil service.
Well, we are in a position as a country where that is a crying need. Now, is it realistic to do that? We've gone from about 380,000 civil servants in 2016 to about 517,000 today. That's about a 35% increase. Now, there were reasons for that. We had COVID, we had Brexit. That did require more resource at the centre by way of people. But we don't have those things now. And the state didn't fall apart in 2016 because it had those fewer civil servants. The saving on that is £8 billion. And that is a very precise number. So to your point about vagueness or otherwise, it is a very careful, fully costed plan that will support the measures that we're taking.
All right. Is it unfair to say, I've heard a lot of this before and very rarely seen it happening, but we'll put that to one side. You mentioned benefits. And clearly, one of the things that any government is going to have to do is get on top of the rising benefit bill. And that means, in particular, looking at very often younger people who are getting incapacity benefit because they have got stress or anxiety or what your party has called mild mental disorders. Now, ensuring that people who have got mild mental disorders are taken off the books, but those who are in real trouble are kept on, is a very, very difficult medical problem. Are you sure you can do what you say you want to do?
We showed in government that we could do exactly that by reforming what's called the work capability assessment. That's a gateway onto those benefits, and taking exactly those kind of
There wasn't much
decisions.
Change in the numbers, though.
Well, there was a huge change. The OBR, who you referred to earlier, actually scored the change in the number of people going onto those benefits as being 450,000 fewer people going into those benefits as a consequence, and a £5 billion saving. Now, what the government did, of course, was to scrap that straight away and then try and pursue its own agenda that it failed to get through. We have shown it can happen. And can I make another point? That we have to have work right at the centre of the debate about welfare. If you have mild anxiety, mild depression, actually having a job and going into work, the discipline of work, that social interaction, you are better off. But to the individual as well as to the taxpayer, because somebody that's being paid benefits, who then moves into work and ends up paying taxes, that's supremely important to the economy, actually, and to all our futures.
Let me turn to the wider politics, because, again, I don't want to sound brutal or nasty, but the danger for your party is that nobody's really listening at the moment. They're looking at the polls and they're focusing endlessly on Nigel Farage and reform, and somehow you have to drag people's attention back to the Conservative Party. Outside the kind of goldfish bowl of conference, how do you do that?
Well, firstly, by holding the government ruthlessly to account, and we have been doing that, and the public expect us to do that. Secondly, to talk about our principles, and I've just talked about the importance of not being on benefits and being in work and personal responsibility and all of those things, to keep talking about that. And thirdly, to do the deep thinking about the challenges we face as a country and what the realistic solutions are. And that's exactly what we've done. So we've gone through a long period of time since the election in which people have criticised us for not coming out with policies and spraying them left, right and centre.
Yeah, I'm surprised you came up with quite so many so early.
Well, because we've been doing that deep. That's because we've been doing that deep thinking, and the reaction you've certainly had from conference and the commentariat and what we've just been hearing about on your programme is bred of the fact that that thinking has been done and we've got credible answers. Reform have no credible answers, certainly not on the economy, because they can't explain how they would deliver the things that they're promising, and the Labour Party is palpably failing with the economy. So we have this opportunity to be the grown-ups in the room when it comes to the debt issue and growing the economy.
You mentioned the Labour Party. You were famously or notoriously asked what you would do if you were Rachel Reeves. And let me read to people what you said. You said, if I was in exactly her position and I had to deal with tax, and I was down that end of the spectrum where it was really big, I would probably go for income tax on the basis that VAT would be inflationary. So, if Rachel Reeves in the budget decides to raise income tax, you will applaud her rather than criticise her?
No, not at all. And you're taking
I'm reading your quote.
Of course you were reading exactly what I said, and that's perfectly reasonable. But let me explain, which is that to contextualise that, it was quite a long discussion about what would happen hypothetically if the black hole was very, very large. I have always made it very clear, and indeed in that meeting made it clear, that what Rachel Reeves should be doing is what we are advocating, which is getting government spending down, particularly welfare, and not putting taxes up. As to if she ends up in her own world in a particular position, what she should do, there are pros and cons of the various options open to her. But she's not in the right place because she's taken the wrong decisions. We should be getting taxes down, not seeing them going up.
Candidly, between ourselves, was it a mistake to say
as
that?
Nobody's listening.
As nobody's listening.
Right? Okay.
Nobody's listening. You're perfectly safe. Was it a mistake to say that, do you think?
No, I think it's important that we have wide and open debate, and when it comes to taxes, that we have those kind of discussions. And I think you and I have discussed, thoughtful debate in the public square. And I think that it's important that we do that. Now, what journalists and your opponents tend to spin on what you say, that's fine. That's for them.
And some of your own colleagues, let's be honest, and some of your own colleagues.
Well, whoever it may be.
Speaking of own colleagues, Kemi Badenoch went into this conference with party members being polled, and more of them wanted Robert Jenrick to be the leader of the Conservative Party than wanted her to be the leader of the Conservative Party. Do you think, because of her speech today and because of the party conference generally, that has finished?
Look, I think polls as to individuals' popularity and indeed parties' popularities are going to go up and down. We're in a very volatile environment for a number of reasons. What we've got to do is focus on what we focused on at the conference, which is to demonstrate that we have a clear plan in quite difficult economic circumstances, difficulties around borders and net migration and illegal migration and so on, and to go out to the public with something that is credible and stacks up. And that is what Kemi Badenoch is doing at the moment. She's showing that leadership. She's shown that leadership at the conference. She's come out of this stronger when many people were suggesting that it might be the other way around. She's come out stronger. She's getting stronger, I think, as a leader through time, and we're going to see more of that quality going forward.
You are not going to be Robert Jenrick's shadow chancellor.
Look, there's no vacancy for the leadership. We have a very strong leadership. She's had a brilliant conference, and as we're discussing now, her position, I feel, is very secure, and she will lead us into the next general election.
Mel Stride, great to have you on the show.
Lovely to be here.
Thank you very much indeed for that.
Thank you.
Now, up next, in Egypt, Trump's envoys are trying to finish his peace plan. Is a ceasefire deal finally on the cards? More on that next, but the time now, 6:18.
LBC.
Managing your business is a big task. To then stay on top of the numbers as well, you're only human. That's why the Intuit QuickBooks AI-powered platform supports your business growth as the #1 recommended cloud accounting software. Intuit QuickBooks. Based on a survey of 506 UK accounting professionals. Verify at quickbooks.co.uk/verify.
Imagine the very focal lens of the future, personalised to you, engineered with artificial intelligence and powered by your visual behaviour. Experience instantly sharp vision in motion with Varilux XR Pro lenses from Essilor. Find your local optician at essilor.com and ask for Varilux XR Pro.
The Monopoly game at McDonald's is back, and with a 1 in 4 chance to win instantly on pack, you could get your hands on a £2,000 Jet2 holiday, a Big Mac, Merlin annual passes for 4, and even more epic prizes. Go on, it's your go. 18 plus, UK, ends 21st of October. Selected menu items, subject to availability. App may be required. See mcdrules.co.uk.
Amazon Prime Big Deal Days are here. 2 days of big deals on electronics, home, kitchen and more. That'll make you feel less like... and more like... feel like a big deal. Amazon Prime Big Deal Days are the 7th and 8th of October. Exclusively for Prime members. Shop now.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
6:19. In Egypt, all the key people trying to negotiate an end to the Gaza war are there. Blessed are the peacemakers. Realistically, I think an actual peace deal, a settlement that might hold, is still some way away. But an exchange of hostages and prisoners and a ceasefire, well, that is still very much in play. Let's talk to Jasmine El-Gamal, the former foreign policy analyst and former Middle East policy advisor to the Obama administration. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. What is your assessment of where we've got to, first of all, in Egypt?
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Andrew. I mean, this is really one of probably the most serious looking level of talks that we've seen, I would say, over the last 2 years. If you look at who's been arriving in Cairo over the last couple of days, including today, Jared Kushner, you have Steve Witkoff, the special envoy for the region, you have the Turkish intelligence chief, you have the Qatari prime minister. I mean, these are real heavy hitters. This isn't just your average negotiating team. So what this tells us is that enough progress has been made over the last few days that they're sending in the heavy hitters now to try to push the deal over the line. So it gives some sense of optimism in a way that we haven't had a reason to hope before. But of course, Andrew, as you know, given how complicated some of these sticking points are, I would say it's too soon to celebrate just yet.
And we should be thinking step by step by step. In other words, if we get, first of all, an exchange of prisoners, an exchange of hostages, and then the beginnings of a ceasefire and the IDF pulling back to agreed lines, that in itself would be a major achievement.
Absolutely. It would be a major achievement, but exactly those things that you just outlined are some of the most difficult sticking points that the two sides have been trying to negotiate. The extent to which the IDF withdraws outside of populated areas in Gaza and then to the border and then outside of Gaza completely, the timeline of that phased withdrawal, the number of prisoners and hostages on the Palestinian side that should be released versus what the Israelis will agree to release, the logistical complications of getting all the hostages, both dead and alive, in one place, stopping the Israeli bombing long enough to get those hostages physically outside of Gaza. Those are not easy things, as you can imagine.
And then there is decommissioning weapons, particularly on the Hamas side. And it's quite sort of individual, this, isn't it? Hamas have particular named leaders and people they want to be released. The Israelis really don't want to release.
Absolutely. And not just prisoners that they want released. They also are asking for the bodies of Yahya Sinwar and his brother, Mohammed Sinwar. As you can imagine, of course, that would be quite the bitter pill to swallow for the Israelis to return those bodies to Hamas. But on the other hand, of course, there is the biggest point that has been hampering negotiations so far is trying to pin down an Israeli commitment to permanently end the war. Now, this is something that Prime Minister Netanyahu has the most trouble with because, as you know, his extremist right-wing coalition partners, Ministers Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, have always said that if he commits to an end to the war permanently, that they will leave his coalition, that they will collapse his government. And of course, then it leaves Netanyahu very vulnerable and open to the political reckoning domestically that he's been trying to avoid for so long. So how Netanyahu can actually sign on that dotted line and say we will commit to permanently ending the war, this is where the U.S. pressure is going to have to come in on the Israelis to get them to make that deal. The Arab pressure on Hamas is there, including committing to demilitarizing, although, of course, Andrew, that's not a process that's going to happen overnight. But the commitment is there on that side. Whether or not there will be a commitment to end the war permanently on the Israeli side yet remains to be seen.
El-Gamal, that's really, really interesting. I want to turn now to the Israeli side in a bit more detail, because listening to that was the former Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert. Mr. Olmert, thank you very much for joining us again. What's your assessment, first of all, of the difficulty of this first phase of indirect talks with Hamas?
I have no idea. I have to be very honest with you. I have no idea. I only hear what is leaked, what is announced directly or indirectly by the different sources, the Egyptians, the Prime Minister's office here, the Turks, the Americans. I guess that everyone wants to be seen optimistic because everyone wants to keep the momentum going in favor of a deal. How realistic it is, I really don't know, and I would suggest that we will be very careful not to create unrealistic expectations.
I think verbal caution's very important at this moment. But let's talk a little bit more about Prime Minister Netanyahu's dilemma here, because the further he advances to agree things which will allow a ceasefire and an exchange of prisoners and hostages, the angrier parts of his own coalition become, and therefore the weaker his own domestic position comes. He seems to be in an impossible situation right now.
He is not in an impossible situation. If he is a leader, he's a true leader. Which is not.
There's an if. There's an if there.
Which is not. I mean, that shouldn't have been a problem. I think that the prisoners, the Palestinian prisoners and their identities is not a crucial issue. I think that there will be, Netanyahu released more than 1,000 killers, the worst possible, including Yahya Sinwar himself. He released him from jail. He was the one that released the leader, all of the leaders, all of the murderers, all of the commanders of the attack on Israel on the 7th of October. So for him to release, even they talk about Marwan Barghouti, I don't think that this will be the problem. The two issues that are more sensitive, one is the depths of the Israeli withdrawal, the withdrawal line from Gaza. That's one thing. And the other thing is how firm and the commitment for a ceasefire, for end of the war, is. These two issues are, first of all, are very sensitive because this is what he has been saying, spelling out again and again and again, everywhere, including in this very memorable theatrical appearance in the White House with President Trump 10 days ago when they announced about the plan. So I don't know that he can afford to do it. I don't know that it will be reconciled with the political partners. These two issues, the withdrawal and the firmness of the Israeli commitment to end the war, period.
Well, we've seen they've published the lines of possible withdrawal bit by bit by bit, so we know what the plan is. What about the demand from the Israeli side that Hamas decommission and hand over their weaponry? Is that practical, do you think? Is that going to happen?
Oh, well, everything is practical if the other side is ready to play the game. I think that it's not practical in terms of, being able to supervise the complete, comprehensive, total decommissioning of every weapon that there may be around. How do you know? How can you check it within that short period of time that is expected for the deal to be accomplished? It's something that should be worked out and searched and supervised for a long time, and I don't think that it's practical to that extent.
Here in Britain, it sounds very like the Good Friday Accord and the process of ending the war in Ireland there, where weapons were put beyond use and there was a stage-by-stage dropping off of weapons and decommissioning. In other words, if there is, as you said, if there is goodwill on both sides, it can be done. But whether there is any goodwill on both sides here is still a moot point.
On both sides, there are factions or sections that are vehemently opposed to any agreement. both the very senior partners of the Israeli cabinet, the messianic terrorist groups of Maguire and Smotrich and all the others that are completely, entirely opposed to any concession of any type. And also there are quite a few, I mean, I'm not comparing the Israelis are terrorists in my judgment, but they are not killers and murderers like the Hamas, okay? But there are groups in the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad which I think are vehemently opposed to any concession. So there are pressures in both sides. How can this combination of attendees, of Witkoff and Jared Kushner and the Turk head of the intelligence and the Prime Minister of Qatar, how really effective they can be in squeezing both sides, by the way, the Israeli side and the Palestinian side, remains to be seen. And how much does it fit in to the timetable that was set? Is it going to happen, if it will happen until coming Friday? And if it will be postponed a week or so, then it can collapse? I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, I think I have no problem in giving the Palestinians all of the killers and all of the murderers. If they will ever return again into an act of terror, they will be eliminated, and they know it. I have no problem in stopping the war, period, and making the most firm commitment. Is Netanyahu prepared for it? I don't know. Are the Palestinians prepared to acquiesce with anything less than this? I also don't know.
Well,
I think that
those are clearly
we'll have to be patient for a while.
Patience. Those are the acid questions you quite rightly ask. Ehud Olmert, former Prime Minister of Israel, thank you very much for being on LBC tonight. Coming up, the former European Commission President and Brexit bogeyman Jean-Claude Juncker joins me to discuss the solution to the tariff crisis facing British steel and much else besides. But the time now, 6:31, and Amelia Cox has your news headlines.
The man responsible for an attack on a synagogue in Manchester made a call to police pledging allegiance to the Islamic State group. Jihad al-Shami made the call after his car hit a wall after he drove into worshippers. Kemi Badenoch has been called painfully out of touch after she pledged to scrap stamp duty if the Conservatives win the next general election. The Tory leader has been delivering her closing speech at the party's conference. And a former president of the European Commission has told LBC he would like the bloc to seek a friendly arrangement with the British steel industry. Speaking on Tonight with Andrew Marr, Jean-Claude Juncker says despite Brexit, we are still close partners after the EU announced a hike on tariffs. You can hear more from him next. LBC weather, cloudy and patchy rain for southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland tonight. Windy elsewhere in the north, but mainly dry. Calm and chilly in the south, lows of 7 degrees.
This is LBC.
31 years ago, the World Wide Web was introduced. The National Lottery launched, and Darwood and Tanner began making people smile. And whilst things have changed a lot since then, Darwood and Tanner's mission to provide the very best dental care through the very latest technology is still at the heart of everything they do. For our most comprehensive, tailored and complete dental implant, root canal and gum disease treatments, visit darwoodandtanner.co.uk.
I'm telling you, raise taxes, that's how.
Cut spending, less waste, more sense.
Move north, get more for your money.
Until winter hits your heating bill.
Fair.
Up to 9.13% annual return. We all agree that's strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard to ignore.
Cufflink. Auto invest property backed from £500. Visit cufflink.com. That's KUFLINK. Register your interest today. Your capital is at risk. Tax rules apply to IF ISAs and may be subject to change. Cufflink is authorised and regulated by the FCA.
At TfL, we're making tube journeys faster in the future, with signalling improvements underway on the Circle, District, Hammersmith and City and Metropolitan lines. And there's also the Elizabeth line, already giving you fast journeys across central London. That is how we're making the greener way to travel brighter for everyone. Search TfL Improvement Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Elizabeth line is fast compared to other TfL modes. Greener than total estimated petrol and diesel car emissions.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
6:34. Now then, if political parties have no God-given right to survive forever, the same is true of once great industries. Because of a new European Union plan to double tariffs on steel and slash quotas, which could come into effect in January, the British steel industry is again facing what could be a terminal threat. UK Steel calls it perhaps the greatest crisis the UK steel industry has ever faced and is begging ministers to open emergency talks. I spoke earlier to the former EU Commission President, Jean-Claude Juncker. Had he got any advice for British ministers?
No, I'm highly concerned, alerted by the situation of the European steel industry. That means the steel industry located on the territory of the European Union. I'm highly alerted, concerned, because we are suffering from the worldwide overcapacity in the steel sector. For instance, the Chinese overproduction in steel is exactly the double of the total steel production in Europe. My father was a steel worker, so I have also a romantic relation to steel industry, but not only romantic, I'm concerned by the business aspect of this, and so I think that the European Commission was right to impose tariffs on steel imports. As far as the British steel industry is concerned, I was always admiring, by the way, the British steel know-how, which was a model for the rest of Europe. As far as the British steel industry is concerned, I do think that the Commission would be well and best advised to seek for specific arrangements between the Commission or the European Union and the European steel industry and the British steel industry. Although Brexit has happened, I will never be a fan of the Brexit decision the British people has taken. We are not enemies, and we should try.
So you think there is a friendly agreement possible to negotiate?
I would like the European Commission to seek a friendly arrangement with the British steel industry, because we are close partners in so many fields despite Brexit, that it would make sense to find a pragmatic arrangement between the British steel sector and the European Union.
That's fascinating. Can I ask you about something that's going to affect a lot of British people this coming Sunday, which is the arrival of the new biometric tests and system to get into the EU and the Schengen area? Clearly, there will be problems at the beginning. Do you think this is going to become as smooth as the current system for travellers generally?
I would like the new system, which has to come after next Sunday, to be as smooth as the no arrangements are. Once again, we are not enemies. We should try to have with Britain an as friendly relationship, including trade and including the matter you are mentioning for the time being, as possible.
And can you explain to people in the UK why this new system is necessary for the EU? What's the point of it?
It's a consequence of Brexit. Things have to be adapted to the new reality, but the adaptation to the new reality should not be an unfriendly adaptation. And so I think that the services of the Commission and the services of the UK government should try to come as close as possible together when it comes to their two pragmatic implementation of the new rules. Life would be easier without Brexit.
That's for sure. In all sorts of areas, it seems in Britain as if the Prime Minister Keir Starmer is moving a little bit more towards Europe for the first time, and that Britain's relationship is tilting a bit more to Europe. Do you see a change of tone coming from London? Do you see a change of substance?
To some extent, yes, because this unfriendly atmosphere which was characterizing the relations between the UAE and the UK and the European Union has come to an end because partners on both sides of the argument do know that the UK needs the European Union, and the European Union needs the UK. And so I do think that all these, there are two pragmatic arrangements which has been found over the last period are pointing in the right direction. So although there are remaining difficulties, remaining areas where no understanding does exist for the time being, there is a clear will of the British government and of the European Union to create as minor problems as possible.
Yeah.
We have to solve these problems, and these things have to develop in a smooth atmosphere.
Yeah. Talking of a smooth atmosphere, however, the opinion polls here suggest very strongly that the next British Prime Minister could be Nigel Farage. How would you regard that prospect?
I know Nigel Farage better than the British do know him, and so I don't want to interfere in a British decision-making process by the voters and by the electors, and it's up to the British to decide if yes or no they want to swim in troubled waters. It would be better for them to be back in normal waters. I like him as a person, I have to say, although he doesn't like me, but I like him. And I think that he's a good opposition leader, but he will not be the best Prime Minister for Britain. But it's up to the British. I am concerned by that, but it's not my job to give advices to the British citizens.
Do you fear that, or do you believe that in the next few years, for instance, a lot of Nigel Farage's natural friends and allies might be in power across other European countries?
I don't think that we will witness copies of Nigel Farage on the continent. But the fact is that the extreme right movements are more and more influential in Europe, and the duty of the classical political families, Christian Democrats, Socialists, Liberals, on the European continent is to fight against these movements which are not in line with the European traditions, but which are gaining, you can't be blind about this, importance in Europe. We have to explain to our citizens, if they are listening, sometimes I have the impression that they are not really listening, that they have to imagine Europe and Britain, because Britain is part of Europe. I never considered that after Brexit was definitely cold-shouldering the European Union. We have to explain to our fellow citizens that they have to imagine a European Union and Britain governed in each and every country, the 27 and Britain, by the extreme right forces. What would that be as a concept of European living together if the extreme right forces would govern all the European countries? It would be a disaster.
We are trying to peer or look into the future at the moment. In that spirit, final question, do you think you'll ever see Britain come back into the EU in your lifetime?
No.
Jean-Claude Juncker, thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC tonight.
And it was my pleasure.
Now, I don't particularly enjoy making your flesh creep, but sometimes it's my job. Particularly since the Trump visit, our political economy is heavily biased towards investment in AI. Ministers talk of little else these days, and yet, as deals worth billions and trillions are announced, economists are beginning to ask, is the AI bubble going to burst? Now, the Bank of England has got involved, warning that US tech stocks are overvalued and risk starting a global shock. Joining me now is the US economics editor for the Financial Times, Claire Jones. Claire, great to have you on the show. Your newspaper has been reporting for some days now some of these really, really big deals that Sam Altman of OpenAI and others have been announcing. As I say, not billions of dollars, but trillions. Do you think we are in for a bit of a readjustment? In other words, things have been overpriced, too much hype?
Well, you noted that the Bank of England said so earlier today. I'd also caution that we've heard a very similar warning from the head of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, said a curtain raiser for the annual meetings of the IMF next week, that she also thought there could be an abrupt correction in tech stocks, and that they're now at the sort of level that we saw, heading towards the sort of level we saw in the dot-com bubble. So there's concerns that we're seeing a lot of market frothiness here are definitely rising.
And when you look at the actual revenues being driven by a lot of these AI companies, they're nothing like the incomes coming in that would justify the amount of money they're spending. I think your paper was reporting that ChatGPT, for instance, wanted the equivalent of another 20 nuclear power reactors to keep it going over the next few years. And these massive deals they're doing with chip makers, there's a kind of hysteria out there, isn't there?
I mean, it's a bold call to make that, but I think what we do see is two things. I mean, I think there's two elements to this. One is that we've seen big rises in the stock prices of some of the major players here, and that's led to a lot of stock market concentration, especially in the US. That's never the safest sign. We've also seen, as you mentioned earlier on, some very big numbers mentioned as regards to investment in AI adjacent kind of capital expenditure. I think longer term, that's perhaps the biggest risk, that all of this money is being spent in the hope that it's going to lead to this sort of productivity boom. In the event, we don't know if that is going to happen for sure. So whether or not that investment will pay off really does remain to be seen. And it's an interesting question as to who will be holding the bag for that if it doesn't pay off.
Absolutely. And if we can look under the bonnet of the American economy just now, and one imagines the big AI investment, Stargate and the rest of it simply not being there, things would look an awful lot bleaker for Donald Trump. And therefore, the question of the connection between the AI bubble, if it's a bubble, and American politics is quite close.
I think so, for sure. I mean, if you talk to officials at the Federal Reserve, the US central bank, the sense that you get from them is that this AI-adjacent capex boom is really quite a big factor in providing the sort of growth that many at the start of the year didn't really expect. So it's a key part of the story of why the US economy hasn't fallen off the cliff. And if all of a sudden it dries up, that is a risk. Now, it doesn't show any signs of drying up at the moment, but it is this sense in which it's this big thing, and investment is very, very concentrated in one sector. We've seen that in the past. Sometimes that's okay. Federal Reserve officials aren't too worried about the sort of crash that we saw in 2008. But it is true that when it comes to growth, the US is very reliant on AI right now.
Absolutely. I don't know if I'm being a moaning mini or a leading indicator here, but if the US is exposed, then the UK is even more exposed, are we not? Because every time I turn to a picture of the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, she's wearing a high-vis vest and a Google or other AI sort of dominated hat of some kind. In other words, they keep talking about the big American investments, and of course the Trump visit brought an awful lot of that to the UK, lots of different companies. Is it a worry for us, therefore, if the AI bubble does go pop?
I mean, I'm very much focused on the US economy. My sense is that it's a bigger story for the US than it is for the UK. But, you know, we do see in general when growth slows in the US, it does become more difficult for other countries in the global economy to grow too.
Well, let's hope very much that we are both predicting or looking at something that never happens. Claire, thank you so much for joining LBC tonight. It's been a privilege. Now, up next, the case against two men accused of spying for China has fallen apart without the country being deemed by the government as a national security threat. More on that in a few minutes, but the time now, 6:49.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
What Kemi Badenoch did today was begin the process of persuading people to give the Tories a listen again. Didn't she?
Ian Dale on LBC.
The Monopoly game at McDonald's is back. There's over £2 million worth of cash prizes to be won. And a chance to get your hands on some epic prizes. Go on, it's your go. 18 plus, UK, ends 21st of October. Selected menu items. App may be required. May depend on winning moment. See mcdrules.co.uk.
If you bought a home on a holiday park in the UK, what you thought you were getting may not be what you ended up with. From unexpected site fee increases, running costs, a huge depreciation in value, many owners feel they've been missold. If you think this might be you, holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive the compensation you're entitled to. Text ASSIST to 78900 to find out more. That's ASSIST to 78900.
For the nappies, peekaboos and tea parties. Mess, tantrums and sleepless nights. All those yo-yos, action figures and shinies. Lifts to mates, lifts to parties, lifts everywhere. For each and every one of those teenage years. Let's be honest, you probably owe your parents one, so tell them about pension credit. It could boost their pension income by an average of over £4,000 a year. Pension credit. Credit where credit's due. Eligibility criteria apply.
It's the last chance to get yourself a ticket for tonight's Lotto draw.
It could be you.
Lotto from the National Lottery. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC. Tonight with Andrew Marr.
6:51. The collapse of an espionage trial involving alleged Chinese spies has provoked some grave questions about whether the government pulled the rug from under the prosecution. And if so, why? It's one of these complicated stories easy to dismiss as an inside Whitehall row. How many of us, be honest, really feel threatened by China? But I think that in itself is narrow-minded. LBC's political correspondent Aggie Shornbury is here now. Aggie, just take us through the sort of basics of this story.
So two men, Christopher Cash and Christopher Berry, were both charged in 2024 with violating the Official Secrets Act by providing information or documents that could be useful to an enemy. Charges that they both have denied in full. And this case collapsed literally on the eve of it going to trial, and lots of questions at that stage about what had happened.
And you say useful to an enemy. And the crucial question is, who is China an enemy?
And that's the crux of this. So there's been a lot of, well, I think it's fair to say briefing wars between the CPS and government. And actually, Stephen Parkinson, who's the Director of Public Prosecutions, said that he took this very unusual step of writing this letter to MPs because there'd been so much briefing from government on why this trial had collapsed. And that point you picked up on before is the crux of this. So is China or is China not an enemy? And under the Official Secrets Act from 1911, prosecutors would have to have had shown that defendants were acting for an enemy. But the government has not called China a threat to national security, instead calling China, in a recently published national security strategy, a geostrategic challenge. And so that is what has been difficult, the DPP says.
And of course, Keir Starmer, who was Mr. Parkinson's predecessor as DPP, has said, I think, in India, that at the time of the alleged offence, China was not deemed to be an enemy, and therefore it was impossible for the government to tell the court that that was the case. And that is, if you like, the government's defence.
That's the government's defence, and basically they're suggesting that it's about when the charge took place, what China was designated at that time. But that doesn't seem to be what Stephen Parkinson is saying. And it was also caused the person who was DPP before Keir Starmer as well to come out and say this all seems to be a bit of a muddle, and suggesting that Lord Hermer, who's the Attorney General, should come before Parliament and explain himself.
And finally, the role of Jonathan Pole, the highly regarded foreign affairs boss in Number 10, former advisor to Tony Blair for many years. He is very close, or has been very close to China.
He's seen, yes, to have been very close to China. And the Sunday Times reported at the weekend that senior Whitehall officials met to discuss the trial, including the National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, and Sir Oliver Robbins, who's the Foreign Office's top civil servant. But of course, the entire context of this as well is this sort of warming up of tensions between the UK and China. And I think that's why lots of very, very difficult questions are being asked of the government tonight.
I think we understand as much as anybody possibly could about this story now, Aggie. Thank you very much. And of course, underlying it all is how we should regard China. So let's turn now to Sebastien Lai, whose father, Jimmy, a British citizen and pro-democracy campaigner, is sitting tonight in solitary confinement in a Hong Kong jail. Sebastien, first of all, before we get on to China generally, any news of your father, how he's doing?
So unfortunately, his health has gotten much worse. He's been in there.
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you. He's been in there for almost 5 years. He's, turning 78 at the end of the year. He's got diabetes. He's been kept in solitary confinement in a little cell in a maximum security prison. So it's no surprise, but incredibly worried about him.
And that takes us to as it were, the more general story about China, because after all, we had an agreement with China which we thought would ensure that people like your father were relatively safe going forward, and the Chinese Communist Party has stamped all over it. Yeah. Should that be the way that we judge China today? Should we be much more worried than we generally are about the country?
I think whatever decision we make regarding China, our government makes would have very wide-ranging consequences, right? We talk about a relationship with China, closer relationship. I think that's the phrase they use, the challenge where we must.
And we remember President Xi coming over and having a pint of beer in David Cameron's favourite pub, and that kind of warming up period.
Yeah, so we're going back to, I mean, from my understanding, the Labour government is trying to get closer to China and challenge where they must. I think that's the phrase that they like to use. But it seems to many in the British public that we have given a lot, including in these allegations that we just mentioned just now. But what's been the consequence of that? Like, what is the, if we talk about relationship, what have they given back? And I think a perfect example is my father's case. I mean, my father's a British citizen. He might very well die in jail. Internationally, the outcry about his imprisonment, if they can't even release a British citizen who is so objectively being mistreated in Hong Kong.
It wouldn't be giving us back very much, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. But if they can't even do that, if they can't even show this act of humanity, then it tells you all you need to know about how they view us as a country, how Hong Kong and China views us as a country.
So if it did turn out that this spying trial was deliberately collapsed by the British government to keep China on side, how would that make you feel?
I'd be incredibly worried. I'd be incredibly worried, and I think a lot of people in this country would feel incredibly unsafe.
We are in a very difficult position, however, aren't we? Because we are not in this country particularly economically strong at the moment. China is the great rising economic power. We've been talking about steel earlier on. In all sorts of areas, they're the people that we need to deal with. And you can see why the British government, looking at their opponents not opponents, I can't say opponents even, looking at their colleagues, shall we say, in Beijing, are very nervous.
Yeah, look, I think there is there's sometimes a misunderstanding about trade. People trade because it's a purely economical act. People trade, nobody trades out of the goodness of their heart. They trade because China wants to buy the stuff that we sell, and then we want to buy the stuff that they sell. Yes. So I think I mean, I'm not saying that the government has, right? But I'm saying, compromising allegations of compromising national security or even being soft on human rights because we want to trade with them is completely misplaced.
We know that Keir Starmer listens to representations from people who've been treated badly abroad, because the Egyptian campaign Abd al-Fattah was released after lots of interventions by Keir Starmer with the President Sisi of Egypt. So we know that he does do these things. So what would be your message to him if he's listening or he gets any account of this?
I'm very grateful that the UK is now on side. Unfortunately for my father, time is running out.
Are they making real representations, do you think, to Beijing?
I don't know, but from my understanding, every minister that goes across does mention my father, and that's what the Prime Minister has, and the Prime Minister has raised the case publicly to Xi Jinping. But I think my father's release should be a precondition to getting closer with China. It's as simple as that. It's an easy thing for China and Hong Kong to do. It's a humane thing, and for a man who sacrificed so much to stand up for democracy and freedom. Surely that's someone that we should make a priority to see him back home here in our country, safe and alive.
There is absolutely no argument against what you're saying. I hope, like water on a stone, it eventually makes some impression. But Sebastien Lai, thank you very much indeed for coming in and talking to us again tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Now, if you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion. You can put your news categories in the order you'd like them. You can pause, you can rewind live radio, and you can listen to a range of podcasts. Download the all-new official LBC app for free from your app store right now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, it's Ben Kentish, but now it's time for Ian Dale.
Well, you planning I wasn't there. Thanks, Andrew. This was my 40th Conservative Party conference. I'm not going to say it was the best attended, the most exciting, or even the most enjoyable. But what Kemi Badenoch did today was start the process of persuading people to give the Tories a listen again.
Stamp duty is a bad tax. The next Conservative government will abolish stamp duty.
She's announced a myriad of eye-catching, fully funded policies, the most headline-making of which was a commitment to abolish stamp duty. Is that the right thing to do? On Cross Question at 8, former Home Secretary Amber Rudd, Labour GLA member Leonie Cooper, campaigner Jovan Owusu-Nepal, and top economist Dr. Linda Yu. At 9, Lenny Henry thinks black people in Britain should get